I was pretty nervous about making friends, fitting in, and being a part of a whole new world way out in the middle of nowhere, Nebraska. I ride with my family, spent a good chunk of time with them helping me settle into my room before saying goodbye, them hopping into the car and driving away, leaving me with no car and therefore no means of escape. Thankfully, it didn't come to that, and one big reason why was my friend Scott, who I met right away as my parents were getting ready to leave. He came into my room with tons of energy, a big smile, and I could tell right away that he liked to talk a lot. For a moment, I wondered if we were long-lost twins separated at birth. He introduced himself to me and my family, and from that point forward, we were the best of friends. I, of course, was a seminarian for the Diocese of Rockford. He was a seminarian for the Diocese of Lincoln. We had great times together for our first 3 years. We did almost everything together. Well, in the middle of that third year, we both started learning more about St. Francis of Assisi and the Franciscan order of religious brothers and priests. And we both began to pray about if God was calling us to serve him not as diocesan priests, but as Franciscan priests who live lives of simplicity, serve the poor, and have really, really long and impressive beards. Together, we came to the conclusion that this was, in fact, what God wanted for both of us. We began to talk about what this would mean for our lives and what our next steps would be. The first step was to talk to our spiritual director, Father Rooney, who is a wise, kind, and caring priest at the seminary. I'll add that there were tons of different priest seminarians could pick for a spiritual director, but of course Scott and I had the same one. I went into my meeting first with Father Rooney and explained to him all the reasons why I was sure that God was calling me to be a Franciscan. He responded by telling me the reasons why he was sure I would be a great diocesan priest. Then Scott talked with him, and Scott, now known as Father Innocent Marie, has one of the most impressive beards that I have ever seen. And he is an excellent Franciscan priest in New York. I mention this story because both of us thought we knew what God was calling us to in our quest to live lives of holiness. But in the end, God was calling us to very different things. And one of us discerned it right, and the other initially didn't. We see something similar happen in the gospel in two different encounters that Jesus had with individuals. The first walks up to Jesus and says, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus essentially tells him how difficult this road is and tells him that physically following him on this journey was not the way that he was being called to be a disciple of Christ. Then immediately following this, Jesus walks up to someone else and Jesus says, "Follow me." And in doing so, Jesus is asking that guy to do exactly what he told the other one not to do. Both the gospel and my own life experience offer examples of people wanting to do God's will, wanting to follow God's plan for their lives, and yet getting a little tripped up while doing so. The fact of the matter is discerning exactly what God is calling us to, either day to day or in the big picture of our lives, it's not always easy. It's not something that just comes to us right away. So what I want to say today is growing in our ability to hear God's voice is so worth the time and effort. Because in the end, it not only allows us to offer the love and praise to God that he deserves, but on a more selfish level, following God's will for us, it's the only way that we're going to experience the deep, lasting, lingering, and underlying peace throughout our lives. And I guarantee right now for all of us, that all of us wouldn't mind having a deeper sense of peace. So what I want to do briefly today is teach you a method of prayer that is so powerful and conducive to hearing his voice in your day-to-day life, so you can follow his path and end up where your heart particularly was created to be. The prayer, it was developed by St. Ignatius of Loyola. It's called the Consciousness Examen. Right? This is not an examination of conscience, right? But this is an examination of consciousness. Hopefully we can see where this is going. The prayer helps us reflect on where we've been conscious of God's presence in our lives, as well as where we might have missed the fact that he was present, where he was calling out to us in the events of our day, trying to love us in the midst of everything that we have going on. And that because of his love, where he desires to guide us through each moment. And I'll tell you right now, God has strongly put on my heart to teach this method of prayer to you because he wants deeply for you to become aware of his love for you. The final thing I'll say before I lay out the steps of this prayer is to say, if you feel like you've been longing to sense God, to know that he's there for you, if you're desperate for your heart to be filled, I'm about to hand you a key right now to unlock the deeper recesses of your heart so that door can be opened wide and God's love can come rushing in. Right? For all of us, when we feel a longing for more of God's love, the reason why we feel that longing, it's not because God's love isn't present there, ready to be received. It's that we don't always perceive where it is. And we struggle to know how to claim it, to accept it, and to let it change, heal, restore, fulfill, and satisfy us. So here we go. And don't worry if you can't remember all of this. I have the steps and the explanation of this inside the bulletin today in my bulletin letter. Right? My recommendation is you pray this prayer in the evening or at night, looking back on the events of the day. The goal also is not to simply get through the steps, but to take time. Really reflecting, allowing God to slowly help things surface in your mind and your heart. The whole thing should take 5 to 10 minutes. So the first step is to make a prayer of gratitude. And in this, you begin thinking back on the day, trying to call to mind things that went well, things that brought you joy, that put a smile on your face. They could be big things or possibly even just the tiniest little place where through a small gesture or something you noticed, God was trying to say, I love you. The most important part of the step of gratitude is becoming consciously aware of the fact that these bright spots in the day are places where God is showing you his love. And you complete this step by thanking God for these gifted and blessed moments. The second step is to pray a prayer to the Holy Spirit for enlightenment. What you're doing is asking God to accompany you as you continue this prayer so that you can prepare to reflect even deeper upon your day in the third step. That this reflection won't simply be a personal mental exercise, you thinking through your day, but that it is a joint exercise in which God is leading you to see now the things that he was trying to show you throughout the day. So the second step of praying for enlightenment might seem simple, but it's crucially important because we need God's grace to pray, and we need to remind ourselves that this is a journey with God. The third step is the heart of the examine. And this step is reflection over the events of the day. During this time, you consider how it is that through your thoughts, words, and actions, you've responded to God's acts of love for you. Have you been aware of his presence? Have you acted as he would call you to do? If for a moment you thought to yourself that the right thing to do in a certain situation would be respond in a specific way, did you follow through with that? Or did you take an easier route? Essentially, this third step is a place to allow God to show you where he was calling you, what he was asking of you, and to see how you responded to him. Quite possibly during this step, you might see a way in which God was present, even calling out to you, but where you were completely unaware of his presence. And the two important things to take note of here are that God doesn't point out areas where we miss the mark because he wants to bring us down. Rather, he does so precisely because he wants to pick us up and help us become more aware of where to look for him in the future. The second thing is I hope you can see why this prayer is so important. Because if we don't take time to try to see these things and to become aware of how easily we miss seeing where God is present, if we don't take time to do this, we're going to always remain right where we are and we'll continue to miss out. Right? This prayer takes us from where we are right now and it leads us to a deeper appreciation and awareness of God's unique and particular love for us. The fourth step is asking God for forgiveness for the places that you just became aware where you may have responded to these situations in a sinful manner. All of us, if we take time to reflect on our day, we will become aware of times and places where we acted more in line with our own will rather than God's. And as with any consideration of sin and any act of asking forgiveness for God, it's crucial that we keep in mind that God is so merciful, that he's waiting for us with open arms even before we ask. And finally, then the fifth step, which I really love, and I think is one of the most fruitful parts, is where we prepare for the next day to come. At this point, we apply what God has shown us about his love, his presence, and desire to abide with us and assist us throughout each day, and we apply it to our upcoming day. So during this step, we look forward to the coming day and we consider the places we'll go, the people we know we'll encounter, the things that will potentially be asked of us. And at this point, then we preemptively ask God to show us how he'll be by our side, and we plan ahead of time how God's going to ask us to act, so we can act in accordance with his will and perhaps avoid falling into some of the pitfalls. Making this preparation will assuredly enable you to follow God more closely. So that's it. Those are the 5 steps of the consciousness examine: gratitude, enlightenment, reflection, forgiveness, preparation. And again, if right now I'm like, what's number 4? You can't tell me. That's totally fine. It's in the bulletin. And at first it might seem a little awkward. And you might kind of be sitting there like, I don't know what to think about. I don't know what to pray about. You don't have to figure it all out. And you shouldn't try to control it. The important thing is you're asking God to lead you through this time of prayer so he can then lead you throughout the rest of the day. As we saw in the gospel and I saw in my own life, simply thinking things through and coming up with a plan or an idea on our own doesn't always cut it. And it sometimes actually leads us away from the peace and the security that God's prepared for us. So I encourage you to strive to pray the examen each and every evening. And I look forward to seeing where it takes you. And most importantly, to see how your relationship with him grows as you become ever more aware of his presence.